I'm your shorter than average girl from down under, and today we'll be looking at the rise and demise of the most evil G-rated villain in Kung Fu Panda 2. Whew, Shen. Yeah, Shen. He's so good at being evil that it makes the movie aggravatingly good. I mean, what do we expect from Sirius Black, huh? On a not so light note,
This is your heads up.
the themes in this movie can get pretty dark, and so can this video at times. And given that a lot of the themes are closely related to a lot of current affairs, there will be some comparisons to the real world. So this isn't just going to be your average theoretical movie that I've previously made and am hoping to continue making in the future. I just wanted the disclaimer out there, just that if there are bits in this video which are a bit too intense for some people, please feel free to use the timestamps in the description to skip those parts. All the dark themes are going to have an asterisk next to them, so if you really want, you can skip those ones. And also, if you're just here for the movie review, you can use those timestamps as well, or click on the one on the screen right now, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk stories.
In ancient China, the peacocks ruled over Gongmen City. They brought great joy and prosperity to the city, for they had invented fireworks. But their son, Lord Shen, saw darker power in the fireworks. What had brought color and joy could also bring darkness and destruction. Shen's troubled parents consulted a soothsayer. She foretold that if Shen continued down this dark path, he would be defeated by a warrior of black and white. The young lord set out to change his fate, but what he did next only sealed it. Shen returned to his parents full of pride, but in their faces, he saw only horror. He was banished from the city forever, but Shen swore revenge. Someday, he would return, and all of China would bow at his feet.
So we start with Shen's final preparations for taking over China. The last few cannons need to be made, and so his soldiers are raiding a faraway village for some resources, and that's when Po and the Furious Five come to the villagers' rescue. And they would have smashed it if it weren't for the fact that Po sees a vision of his mother. Confused by this, Po returns to his father to try and find some answers, and that's when he finds out that he's adopted. Now, this opens a whole can of worms for Po, but he doesn't have that much time to ponder about it because Shen has taken over Gonman City. And so Po and the Furious Five end up traveling to Gonman City to bring Shen to justice and destroy all his cannons. And this also doesn't go to plan because upon meeting Shen, Po realizes that Shen was there the last moment he saw his mother. Blinded with the desperation to find answers, Po goes against the concerns and orders of Tigress to stay behind, and decides to go and confront Shen once more for some answers. But as Tigress feared, he played exactly into Shen's hand, and he was shot right outside the city while all the members of the Furious Five get captured. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The soothsayer saves Poe's life and brings him to the village where he grew up in as a baby. Being back in the destroyed houses and burnt down rubble, it triggers Poe's memory, but his mind has repressed those memories to help him cope as a child. Poe would now open his mind and let those memories creep out of his subconscious. Knowing the truth was painful for Poe, but it gave him some peace. Not only did he now have the answers that he desperately wanted, but the missing pieces of his past were finally restored, and now he has a full picture of how he got to the place where he is now. Letting go of the things that you don't have control over by letting them flow through you allows a person to find some kind of tranquility. And that's what Poe did. He unblocked the channels in his mind which sought to protect him for so long. But when he did that, his mind finally cleared. And so, with his newfound clarity, Poe was able to rescue the five, destroy Shen's fleet, and can I just say this is one of the best Western animated fights? It's just
Keep firing! Keep firing!
After Shen's plan was foiled, Poe speaks to Shen, telling him to let go of his past, like the grudge that he has towards his parents. But unfortunately, Shen doesn't want to do that, and it bothers him so much that Poe was able to let go so quickly. After killing his family and destroying his people, he wanted Poe to be as outraged as he was because that would help him justify his own actions. But Poe wasn't gonna be that for Shen, and so he was happier to die than face his own actions and shortcomings. And so that was the end of that. Shen's gone, Poe's mastered inner peace to Shifu's dismay, and we get a glimpse at Poe's father and a whole bunch of pandas who managed to survive Shen's massacre. But that's for another story. Unlike the first movie, the villain in Kung Fu Panda 2 gets a lot more screen time with the audience. So, at the end of the day, we aren't just following the journey of Po, but Shen's as well. And their tales are not just opposites, they're intertwined and completely dependent on one another, just like the yin and yang. And I bet you didn't see that one coming. So, we'll be covering Shen and Poe's journeys in this movie to fully understand today's story. Let's start with Shen. Shen was born as an albino peacock to the Emperor and Empress of Gonman City, a title that they both received after their invention of fireworks, which tells us from the get-go that Shen has the smart gene and that he has a difference which would automatically make him feel out of place. So when he saw the potential in fireworks for another purpose, I wouldn't say that I was surprised. And even if Shen saw the potential of destructive power and darkness in fireworks, he hasn't done anything yet which would label him as evil. But his parents were worried. Given that they'd invented fireworks, I'm sure they knew of this damaging potential, and seeing their son kind of delving into that field concerned them. They were worried that maybe he'll go a bit too deep and too far into his curiosities. And so they consulted someone who was very close to Shen, his babysitter, asking whether they should be concerned or not. It just also happened that Shen's babysitter is also a soothsayer. She prophesied,
A peacock is defeated by a warrior of black and white.
now, this is when things go downhill. A logical person, to avoid being defeated, would just stop going down their current path and use an alternate route. But Shen didn't want that for some reason, and so he decided to get rid of anything which looked black and white, including all the pandas, or so he thought. And yes, now we can say that Shen's absolutely lost it. Because to cause this much carnage, a complete genocide,
In order to avoid a prophecy from coming true,
you have to be the most selfish, the most arrogant, disgusting, and... But for Shen, this was a survival instinct, self-preservation. He didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing, and so he returned to his parents proud of himself, not realizing that what he'd done has only cemented his own demise. And his parents banished him because he's now a true threat to Gunman City. I mean, I personally think that they should have put him in jail so that he couldn't do anything, but I guess they thought banishment was the better solution. I'm not sure how. Maybe they felt guilty putting him behind bars. This decision made Shen loathe his parents because he was seeing them as an obstacle to his success, or perhaps he was seeing them as being unsupportive or unprotective. I mean, he was doing this act out of self-defense for his future self.
right?
Obviously, that justifies killing innocent men, women, and children in the now. I mean, how don't you get it? And so, to add to his inflated ego, which was now wounded by his parents' reaction, he loathes them and vows to prove his absolute greatness by taking over all of China. And so that's what he was working for.
For 30 years.
I mean, I gotta give it to him for his patience. But then all of his focus and determination goes out the window when he hears that there is a panda still alive. And all he can think of is getting rid of this panda before he can take over China. Which means that Shen still fears the prophecy. And even when he finally meets Po, and he's not the terrifying panda that he built up in his head, he still can't get over his fear of him. He needs him ended so he can get him out of his mind so that he can take over China. Even if it means murdering him and anyone else in the process. Ultimately, this hysterical fear leads Shen to make irrational decisions like using up all his cannons on one panda, destroying his own fleet, and killing his own men. And it doesn't get him anywhere. His fear ultimately destroys his ambition to take over China, and so 30 years worth of planning just went down the drain. When his rampant attempts to end Po still don't work, and he's wasted 30 years worth of resources to no avail, Shen sees no point in continuing to live. All he wants to do is just kill Po for making him go mad, even though it's all his fault and everything that he's built up in his head. And when he failed to do that, he was happy to accept death because it was better for him than to accept that he had failed. He had destroyed not only his own life, but the life of so many other innocent people. All his life, Shen saw himself as perfect yet misunderstood. And so, holding on to this false belief, he justified every single one of his action and only blamed others for when things didn't go his way. Not only did Shen crave control, he believed that he was entitled to it because there's no one better than him. And so negative consequences are only casualties in Shen's eyes. Casualties for a better future. For him, Shen's narcissism stopped him from accepting redemption and feeling remorseful. It drove his paranoia and makes him the unredeemable villain that he is. Po, on the other hand, shows us how to deal with isolation and misunderstanding with humility. Po wasn't much older than 100 days old when Shen attacked the Panda village, and in that attack, not only was Po separated from his family, but he lost them entirely. Because Po was so young when this happened, and his life in the Valley of Peace with his adopted father was so good, he didn't feel that loss as a child. Now, his childhood was far from perfect, but most of it came down to his confusion with identity and purpose rather than loss of his family. This confusion still hurts.
I stayed because every time you threw a brick at my head or said I smelled, it hurt. But it could never hurt more than it did every day of my life just being me.
But that hurt is different from that of loss. Shen lost. He lost his throne, he lost his home, his family, and other people's trust. And a loss is like a wound. First, it requires packing with lots of gauze and wrapping. It needs quite a bit of attention at first, but then slowly and slowly it can be released, and new tissue will replace the old one and it heals. But if it's not looked after correctly, it scars and keeps that lingering nastiness forever, which would explain Shen's current state. Mr. Ping did an excellent job in stopping a scar from forming on Po, and that's what we see.
Scars heal.
No, they don't. Wounds heal.
Oh yeah, what do scars do? They fade, I guess?
I don't care what scars do.
You should, Shen.
However, wounds leave behind a memory, a cause for the injury, and this is something that a person can never be free from. So even though Po psychologically has shown no signs of trauma because of good healing, it doesn't mean that he was never traumatized. Disassociating with a trauma is not good for a person because a piece of their current being is left unexplored, and so one will never be able to understand themselves completely, but instead will continue to be plagued with self-doubt and lack of worth. Poe's hurt from his identity struggles are derived from the fact that his traumatic past was sealed away from him in his own mind. It's a coping mechanism in the moment, but it's one that needs to be unpacked later on so that a person can feel every aspect of themselves in the now, aka gain inner peace. It was only when Po allowed himself to remember the past that he could understand the full scope of his journey and appreciate the presence of those around him in his life. The past makes us, it doesn't break us, even the hard parts. Without proper healing, then revisiting it, one will never understand the why. And if you don't understand the why, you'll never understand the how. And the how you are is what matters. Attaining complete acceptance and contentment for oneself is inner peace. For you recognize that the things that are not in your control are still a part of you, but you control how so. Something happens, but you decide the impact it has on you. And by doing that, you stop yourself from worrying. And so you gain peace. As Po shows us, understanding the patterns of cause and impact of one's past and making the necessary changes to the impact so that it no longer blocks our progress in the now, we will be free from the negative impacts in the future because we know that we can control it. Po chooses not to let Shen's actions impact his judgment when facing him. He took control of the way his trauma influences him. And so we get my favorite part in the movie, the face-off. The dichotomy between Po and Shen in this moment, whew, peace versus turmoil, single versus many, concentration versus inattentiveness, calm versus hysteria. It's just funny to watch Shen bring himself to ruin in the span of like a few seconds because Po decided to be the bigger person in this instance. But essentially, Po is showing us the formula of how to win a battle. Stand strong in their way without fear of loss, accepting that you're standing on the right side of history, and let them work themselves to their downfall. As Shifu says,
Before the battle of the fist comes the battle of mind.
and the other half is using their own power against them. The only strength and training that you need is how well you know yourself and your purpose. It's not about jumping into every situation and pretending to be the hero. It's about knowing when to jump into a situation and how you can truly become the hero. An emotional response or seeking revenge will only lead to the formation of more villains, not heroes. But a calm and thoroughly thought out move with purpose, with good intent, with others in mind, and an immense amount of patience will break down those who do evil. At the end of the day, the natural order of things will always keep the balance of life in check. And so evil acts will never prevail. They will always be thwarted when they overstep the boundaries. You see, if nature interfered and stopped all that one individual would consider as evil, then we won't be able to identify what is good and what's not. And if that's the case, then we can't make right choices and receive positive repercussions for our own actions. And so bad actions are as important as the good ones because that's what we use to create common boundaries between us, how we make laws, how we make social systems, and etc. And on an individual level, that's how we build ourselves. However, large-scale evil, which tips the balance between growth and destruction in the world, will ultimately be stopped by the natural system that we live in as it seeks to re-establish equilibrium. And this was the simple fact that the soothsayer was alluding to with her prophecy. No matter how many black and white animals Shen ends up killing, if he continues to bring destruction, continues to build a vacuum in the natural fabric of life, where living things cannot complete their part of the system, then to restore balance, he will need to be eliminated. And yeah, it did take 30 years, but these things don't work on our timescales. As Po showed us, we need to stall that time and soften the impact, waiting for that moment where equilibrium is reached. Just like Po, make the impact of a cannon that of a dewdrop. And if we continue to do that for long enough, the cannon will stop shooting and an infinite ceasefire will be established. Never lose your footing, your teachings, or your past, or your potential, and never lose your will to live. revenge and emotions never got nobody nowhere. It's only with a clear mind and a clear heart that each person can stand up against wrong and become part of the natural restoration.
真実はいつも一つ。
This movie is quite dark, not only cinematically but thematically. Although we don't see any on-screen deaths, many die under Shen's rule. At the end, there is a happy ending, but that's after a road of losses and tragedy. It's a beautiful sequel to Kung Fu Panda 1 because after glorifying status, this movie brings us back to the real world where things aren't perfect. Fighting for the truth isn't easy, and being on the right side of history requires a lot of sacrifice. It's a movie the whole family can learn from, given that the themes aren't too much for the kids. Behind every villain is a fear, and behind every hero is a tragedy overcome. So that is 2 of 3 of the original Kung Fu Panda trilogy. Make sure to stay tuned for the final review of the series till now by subscribing to this channel and hitting the notification bell so you do not miss out. If you want to watch this movie in your own time, please make sure to stream it on a platform that doesn't support the violation of human rights or the spread of negativity in the world. If you enjoyed this, please consider giving us a like and sharing it to whoever else likes this content. And don't forget to comment what your thoughts are on Kung Fu Panda 4. But for now, be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.